Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists.
Well, Douglas, we decided to jump in here and try to knock out a podcast preamble here before we head off to our first shows of the year. It's nice to see you on here. I know we're a little bit frantic getting work together.
It's like, okay, we got a spare 15. Should we knock this out right now? And we're doing it right now.
Yeah,
here we go.
Exactly. I feel like we're trying to make a baby. I'm ovulating, Douglas. Get on the mic.
Jump on that mic.
All right, Douglas, you're more of a communicator than me. I feel like you've got like a stable of friends that you're constantly in touch with. Is that true?
I keep in touch. I try to. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got a fairly large group. I feel like I don't. Right. Oh. I mean, I kind of do and I kind of don't. I just see people at shows, and then my wife and I, like my email list is pretty short, and so is my wife's. And,
okay, but where are we going with this, Will?
Well, I just don't have an awful lot of contact with people until they find out that you're on a jury. Have you found that to be the case?
I was on a jury this past weekend. I didn't have too many people reaching out and wanting to buddy up with me. No, I haven't had that experience.
Well, maybe it's just because you're not noticing, because I feel like you're kind of taking the torch of mayor of Arttown from like Michael McKee and Eric Lee. I feel like I think you're ready to make a move and be Arttown mayor. And maybe you're just used to all of the communication, and I'm not that used to it. So you start to see, like, I've got a very dear friend that's getting ready to be on another jury.
Okay.
She's like, oh, that's interesting. Haven't heard from you in a while. Jury sluts. They're coming out of the woodwork just like, hi, do you remember me? It's nice to see you. Oh, is that a new shirt? You're looking very handsome. I'm like, get out of here.
Well, I did have an interesting weekend this weekend. I was on the jury for Art in the Pearl, and there's a lot of experiences that I want to share about it. So we might dedicate this entire first part of the podcast to just talking about things. Because, we've talked about juries throughout the last 3 years on the show. And we've kind of had our stable of reactions at how you and I felt. But this changed a lot of those points of view for me. So, yeah, a lot of great experiences this weekend.
Okay, interesting. What changed? I mean, in previous jury experiences, I feel like folks are ready for the good and they're ready for the bad going into a jury. But they're not ready for the sheer volume of like middle of the road, like stuff that doesn't really move the needle left or right. It's just like, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, I do. We do know what to do with it, but how was your experience? I mean, you tell me. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Sure. Well, what was different for me was when I first got into the business of doing these art fairs, I went to the projected juries. I went to a number of them to kind of get a feel of what I was up against, what the formatting was. And this jury that I did this weekend for Art in the Pearl was a monitor jury. And I feel like from what I'm hearing out there, that there might be a lot more. The tables might skew or tip towards the monitor jurying, which I think getting some feedback out to our listeners about what my take was on it might be helpful, might give people choices. Yeah.
You think as far as like helping folks with what they're showing, as far as their slides and stuff, is that?
The presentation. I used to feel like that the order of the images presented in a collective across the room when it's projected had impact. And I would select my images on that kind of overall snapshot.
Right.
But when we're doing a remote jury, and as artists, we have the ability to view our own applications just like how the jury is going to view it.
Sure, on Zap, like you just preview as juror, right? Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly what the juror is seeing.
Got it.
When they do the remote jury.
Okay.
So there was a couple of nuances in that, because when they were in a lineup, the images are so small, and I'm using a big monitor. I'm not using a laptop or whatever. I have a nice big screen. That the layout of the images kind of loses its luster because you can't really see enough of the image to get an impact of the body of work.
Interesting. So even on a big screen like that, you feel like you're like, the way I feel about it a lot of times is like I'm looking at it through a pinhole camera. You know, it's like you can't, you're trying to look something up on the phone and you're kind of like, I want to see the big picture of the map. I don't want to just see this like little thing, but it's kind of like that with the jury, huh?
It is. So when you go through, they make it so that you can't skip ahead and just look at a block of the 4 images in a booth and move on. You're forced to individually take in each full-sized image on your screen, one after the other consecutively. You get one last kind of group shot, which again is small, and then you score. So it's really important when you're thinking of placement and order is thinking of the image sequentially. Like, what's the next one going to build on the one previous and the next one build on the previous? It might just be a different way of approaching how you want to pick your images or how you want to put them together.
That's, I've always kind of assumed that it was like that, like that you'd be reading it, like you're flipping through a book almost. Like, I want me personally, I want my lead image kind of facing to the right, which leads you into the next one. Whereas the middle ones are kind of facing, the composition is more out. And the one on the end kind of faces you back into the, it's almost like you're composing. I am anyway. I don't know if it makes any difference, but I that's what I do.
I would say that the tension that you're talking about is important, and especially if we want to start putting our focus on, is this a projected jury or is this a computer monitor jury? We might want to make some different decisions on that. So that was my first take. My second thing was, remember years ago when Zap said you don't have to upload borders anymore?
Yeah.
Okay, so this particularly pertains to the landscape orientation of your images. And that is that if you upload the 1920 as your width and you don't do the borders, and I think anyway, I want everyone to do this for themselves just to make sure. But if you want your landscape orientation to fill the whole screen and kind of like take over the viewer's eyes, you wouldn't want to do the border of the top and the bottom because it fills.
Don't do the border?
Correct. When it's a remote viewing, that landscape,
losing...
right, it just shrinks it in. But there was something about when I would flip and I'd get a landscape orientation that was not done with the top and bottom borders, it filled the screen. And whether the work was great or not, it gave you more of a presence. I mean, it kind of like you sit back and you go, whoa, and it kind of your eyes get to take in more. Yeah, so that was something to consider.
Right. I feel like I know that. I actually know that. It goes against what some of the people online are saying, like some of these advisor groups that there's a guy that does that all the time. He's a big proponent of like, you have to put your black borders on, and it's like, well, okay, well, I knew that. So I feel like I'm doing some bad acting. What, Douglas? I can't believe it. It's interesting to see that, right?
It's a choice. And I think if you were going to have a projection jury, you'd want everything to be congruent. If it's like, these are the 5 images we're looking at all at once, and then these 5 images are going away, where your eye can kind of like bounce back and forth between all the images. But if you're just going one image at a time, it's something you might want to consider.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Good advice there. Is there anything as far as like what you saw this past weekend, and since this is fresh, like things that work and don't work that people are doing?
Well, I'll tell you what doesn't work. There's some bad booth images. I mean, a booth image with a group of people standing in it, like, look, my booth is busy all the time,
but
does not do anything.
Though, when you're slogging through the thing, it is important to have a shitty booth image so that you know who to just cut right away, right? Because it's so much stuff to look through, right?
Yeah.
Don't change your booth image. Leave it up. Leave it bad. I'm for more bad booth shots so that we know who to hack through and just throw in the garbage. I mean, seriously, like I all the stuff about like all of these coaching things and online about all this stuff with your booth image, and it's a hack detector, right?
It's totally a hack detector.
I mean, that's the one thing. Like, it's like to see the context of the work. You're right. You got the context, and it's like, oh well, the context is it's shit.
Okay. Well, I do have a reaction to that because you'll look at the work, and like I found myself rooting for some work that I hadn't seen before that was really well done. And then I got to the booth shot and I went, And so we all asked, because there was, well, I'll backtrack here. The way this jury is set up is there's no talking amongst us. Like I can't say, I really like Exhibitor A.
Right.
I hate Exhibitor B.
This is my podcast co-host. Can we give him a flyer?
This guy rocks. Yeah. But so the only time we were really encouraged to speak is to ask questions for clarifications or whatever. And the question came up was, how do they want us to rate the booth shot? And they said they primarily want us to rate it on the work, because if, based on the score that gets in, if they feel like the booth shot needs work, this particular show is going to reach out and advocate on behalf of the artist to up their game or talk to them about ways that they could be better. So I think that helps kind of an emerging crowd step into the market.
Yeah, it does. And I kid with that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big proponent for emerging artist programs and helping people up their game. But I do think that, the booth shot sometimes is like, that's the context, right?
It is.
Well, sometimes the context is that I don't like it anymore, right?
I had stuff I liked better when I saw the booth shot, and the reverse. I had stuff that I liked less once I saw the booth shot.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. What else did you learn this past weekend? Anything else that popped out?
I really like the way that they do this jury, because there are some juries where really the jurors, it's their job to pick the show through collaboration and discussion, and they'll get to the end and they'll be like, well, we only want to allow in 10 class artists, but we've got 20 to choose from that we've narrowed down who gets the spots and who's on the wait list. We didn't get any of that. We were totally individual scorekeepers, and I have no idea who's in the show that I just juried. I know who I would have picked. And the feedback from other jurors was they felt like that kind of talking that they've experienced on other juries is just counterproductive. It can be contentious. It can, who really cares if I like something and the other juror doesn't?
Well, I do. I think that's I kind of like the other way. I kind of prefer the other set of jurying, so that you can be like, hey, how many of this do we have? This person looks a little bit like this, so maybe we cut that. Who do we want over this one or this one?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That seems to be an interesting way to compose a show or to curate a show, if that makes sense too.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, everybody. It's kind of like, I prefer 4-day weekends. You prefer 2.
Who said that?
Maybe not just you, but what I mean.
No, just saying some people. Yeah, right. For example,
some people. I don't know. I like to set up shop. I like to go and have a talk. And sometimes somebody knows more about, if there's a jeweler on the jury, for example, they can explain to me what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm more educated than most because I live with jewelry, but as far as if you don't know what you're looking at, be like, hey, this simple clean bezel is harder to set a stone in and have it clean than, this over here that has more bells and whistles on it and more, the filigree and all this other stuff is like, okay, that's hand done. That's hand carved. This is machine done. I can recognize it. If you don't know what you're looking at, sometimes it helps to say, hey, what is this guy doing? It's very clear. Some artwork comes through the jury and you're like, I like that. That's good. What is it? It's pencil. Holy shit. I want that in my show.
Sure.
Versus something else where I'm like, what is this that I'm seeing? So sometimes it helps to have somebody in the jury room that can talk you through it. So,
we did have that. And we did that through the jewelry a lot. Believe me, we had a jeweler on the jury, and it'd be like, what am I looking at here? What are are these components they made, or are these components that they sourced and built? Or
right.
That was definitely allowed. But what wasn't allowed was I couldn't pick out an exhibitor and say, I love this work. Everybody score them great. You know what I mean? That stuff was kept at bay.
Got it.
So, but I think part of it is too, Pearl is a show that is run by artists, and there are shows out there that are run by artists that kind of, come from our point of view. They know what's important to us.
Absolutely.
So, what we've been talking about with Rick Rubin, how we train ourselves he talks about how he gets these gut reactions from work, from music, for example. That's his industry.
Right.
I started to feel that way as we got rolling with the jurying is you could settle into that that gut reaction.
Uh-huh.
And the thing about the monitor jury that I thought was nice is that when it is all projected at once and you have all images at once, you are sitting there waiting for, like, quickly. You're almost like panicking, like, when are they going to take all those images away? I've got to soak it all in. But when you are the juror on a remote jury, you're in control of when you've seen enough and when you can move on. And you can really settle into that flow of see it, react, move on, see it, react, move on to all of the images. So you can get kind of an overall. And it was a very interesting process to kind of trust that gut reaction and to know where it was taken, to know where it was taking me.
You're taking me to sleep.
Okay, fine.
Boring. All right, I've heard enough about all this.
Heard enough.
I was
of
a
it.
juror on Portland's Amazing Art in the Pearl.
But yeah, no, that was good.
I like shows. I like juries. Sorry, I don't have anything else to add. Just leaving you. I'm supposed to say yes to whatever. Hey, speaking of saying yes, we had the most random, like the lamest random celebrity sighting on our plane back from Baltimore.
Ooh.
It's like I kind of heard this voice, and I'm like, I think I know. Like it's a I don't even know what network it's on. My wife puts it on sometimes, but Say Yes to the Dress.
Oh, is that like one of those Bravo or whatever shows?
Yeah, it's like a Bravo show.
Yeah,
and it's like this guy who is he's very kind, and he brings these gals onto the show, and they have a big fight about what wedding dress they like and all this stuff. And he's whatever. But the only reason I recognized it is because the flight attendant was being such an a-hole about his dog. Like, that has to fit out. Like, look, I fly 6 times a week. Like, it always sits right here with the, it's fine. And she's showing him the rule book. She had to be right. It was one of these people that had to be, was like rule stickler to the degree. So that's the only reason. And somebody was just bitching and complaining. But we were laughing. I'm like, that's got to be the lamest celebrity sighting of all time. Like, I can't imagine. Like,
right. Pulling back the curtain on that one.
Say yes to the dress. Holy shit. So this week you actually have one of my art show heroes that I'm as excited to hear the talk as anybody else. Haven't heard a rough cut. Nothing. You've been cagey about this one, Douglas.
I haven't even had a chance to work on it yet. It's so crazy getting ready for this show.
You're going to be at Bayou and be like, I've got to go back to the hotel to get the podcast in. So anyway, maybe it'll be a day or two late. You never know. But
yeah, it's probably for sure going to be going out at the end of the week. But by the time they hear this, then they'll know when it came out.
Yeah, it's now. It comes out right now.
It's out now.
It's live. It's right now. But Kirsten Stingle, an amazing creative person, and I love her vision and kind of unflappable direction that she's gone in with her work for her entire career, and just a lovely human as well. So thank you, first of all, from all of us, really, for sitting down and talking with her and getting this view on the air.
Here she is, Kirsten Stingle from Atlanta, Georgia.
This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
So, Will, it's that time of year again when we all need to start getting stuff ready for taxes.
Thanks for that, Douglas. I appreciate that. We all do, quite literally. I did get an email recently from Zap. They were talking about doing line items and keeping everything together in one place.
Yeah, that's right. I tried it out for myself. So when I was logged into Zap, I went to my profile, and one of the options further down the page is to download your transaction history.
Amazing. That's after you've proven to them that you're not a robot by correctly identify the tractor before you play that lovely game.
So once you've identified that you're an actual human, it's super easy just to select your date range, and then it will create a report of all your purchases so you can hand off those booth fees and application fees directly to your accountant. Kirsten Stingle, welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast. I'm so glad to meet you. This is the first time we've ever met.
Yes, thank you. I'm really happy to be on here and talking to you.
You are part of a gallery that my friend Steve Cox is a part of. So I kind of saw your social overlapping with his social, and I'm like, you know what? And looked into your work. I was like, you seem like somebody I'd really like to get to know and talk to.
Oh, thank you.
Glad you could carve out some time today.
Absolutely.
I have to say, though, I am a little disappointed about something. I was
Oh,
expecting you to show up with your big pink wig. I thought this was going to be like, what's going on here? I don't get the wig. What's up with that?
that's my show persona. So yeah,
I
actually
see.
somebody suggested you should wear the wig, and I'm like, then it gets into a thing of, is she wearing it while she vacuums? What's going on? So
Is this in your everyday life? And anyone who wants to know what we're talking about could clearly go to your Instagram and see, part of your profile pic and you at shows. You have this beautiful, fun character that you kind of take on,
right,
right?
exactly. Yeah, big fluffy cotton candy wig. Yeah. I always say at the shows I'm living in my character's world. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
so is it a kind of an extension of the work that you're making too? So
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I sort of stumbled upon doing that because it was funny. I was showing with OK Spark at Sofa, and it was
okay,
Halloween. And I had purchased the wig with the intent of like, maybe wearing it at some point. And so I thought, well, it's Halloween and it's the opening. I might as well just wear it.
right.
And so it was a great success. I mean, because all of a sudden it sort of like broke the ice with people. And so people
Okay,
were
yeah.
coming up to me and just, chatting or wanting a picture or anything. And so it became a way for me to be sort of comfortable in myself without feeling like I'm on stage trying to like, let me
Mm,
explain my work to you. Let me tell you about my work. It was just
sure.
felt like much more natural, or I could be much more natural in it. So yeah, after that, I
Uh-huh.
was just like, let's just keep wearing it because it's sort of fun. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of roll with it.
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny because it really does sort of link, like if someone's like, "Oh, do you know Kirsten's work?" And you're like, "I don't know. I might, the woman with the pink wig. Oh yeah, 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 I know her work." So it sort of bookmarks me a little bit.
It's your branding thing, right?
Right, right.
Well, what I do know about you is that you have a theater background. So, I mean, does part of it come into that, the
I
theatricality of
think
it?
definitely it does. I mean, you can see that theatricality in my work. I was
Hmm.
always afraid to get on stage when I was in theater, so I did back of the house stuff. But this is, I
Okay.
guess, my chance to sort of spread my wings a little bit. So,
For
yeah.
those people all listening to the podcast keeping score, we can add another list to the tally of the former theater people turned visual
Yes.
artists.
In a way, it's really not surprising because, I think
Yeah.
we're all just trying to figure things out and tell our stories. And so having that theater background, you're trying to tell stories and trying to get across themes, and it's a little bit easier. It's less collaborative nuances when you're individual artists,
Mm,
if that makes any
gotcha.
sense.
Yeah, it's like all of these people are working on an aesthetic. It's such a communal thing. And
Yes.
it's like we all are working together to kind of tell that same story. So there is that communal, collaborative aspect in that respect. I mean, so
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There is that sort of family feeling, especially with in
mm,
in art shows and things like that. Yeah, yeah.
hmm Well, let's talk about what you do, what you make as an artist, and kind of your voice in that. So tell me about your work and you.
Okay, yeah. I consider myself a narrative sculptor. All the figures are in hand built porcelain. I don't use any
Mm,
molds. They have ceramic finishes. And then after they come out of several times in the kiln, I then build up layers and layers of mixed media and found objects to sort of tell the narrative. What I'm trying
mm,
to do with my work is I want the viewer to get lost in it and sort of explore it. And I think in some ways it's like the worst thing to try to accomplish as a sculptor because really it's so much easier. Like if you're in a theater, they dim the lights, you get lost on what's on stage and you enter part of the story,
hmm
right? And even looking at a painting, that border around it, you sort of get It sort of focuses
Mm.
your mind and your imagination. And I think with
Mm.
sculpture, in a lot of ways, what you've done is complete opposite. I mean, it sits on a pedestal, so it's sort of alienated from the viewer. And I understand the reason for that. It's because it makes it more special. It highlights the object. But what I'm trying to do is
Right.
highlight the story. So
Mm.
that bit of alienation, that isolation between the pedestal and the person is really a stumbling block. So what I've tried to do is just layer and layer and layer little details in mixed media, just so the person can start to get drawn in and get lost in it through all the details. And the story sort of
Okay.
unfolds that way.
Okay, so let's say there's an element of gesture, maybe an object your figure is holding or expression, that those can all be means to tell the greater story.
Oh, absolutely,
Is that what you're
absolutely.
describing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for gesture and expression, I spend a lot of time on those aspects because they really are. I mean, that's something that theater teaches you. It's the powerhouse of the story, right? So I
Yeah.
spend a lot of
Uh-huh.
time on that. But in my mixed media work, I eco dye fabric and then I make hand stitched flowers and forms from it, and then beat it, and then maybe rust it. And so it's just level after level of layers. If I have a flower on something, I don't want you to say, "Oh, like I think I saw those flowers at Joann's and they were on sale for, 50% off."
Mm-hmm.
Because it takes you then out of the story. You're all of a sudden in current
Right.
your contemporary society. So I want you to stay lost in there, and I want everything to feel very much like it's that world.
Right.
Yeah. So the details are not only an OCD issue, but it's also just because I really want to hook the viewer in. And so they stay engaged with the piece.
This reminds me of a conversation that we just had. The episode will come out before yours with Joachim Neal. And he talks about how he gets an idea and then he feels like a slave to that concept. Like every little detail, he has to go down the road of specificity and
Mm,
every element is to be considered. And it sounds to me like you're kind of just describing that. You want everything to kind of go deeper and not a step away from the overall
yeah,
concept or the overall
exactly.
story.
Yeah.
Well, and that is also very theatrical in the sense of the suspension of disbelief, that is
Right.
in theater. Right. So every
Absolutely.
little aspect of what we're doing is taking us further into the story and removing the things that will detract.
Right. Exactly. And just spinning off of this, in fact, with my work, I'm also trying to collaborate with other mediums to also push my work. And so it's less of an object and more of a strong narrative device. So, like I've even partnered with a actress from Rome.
Oh.
It was a piece that involved film. It involved her monologues and a stage piece, and then my pieces also supported and were part of the story in that. And so I'm always
Mm.
looking for ways to sort of push that. I mean, another way is I've worked with several photographers and we take my pieces and put them in natural settings. A lot of times I try to put them in like abandoned settings. And so all of a sudden it takes that narrative where if you usually you would have like a black background in a picture. And so you're highlighting again the object. But this all of a sudden with an environment around it, it sort of narratively explodes and I think really brings out what I'm
Mm.
trying to express in my work.
Cool. So it almost becomes like installation work in a way because the
Yes,
environment then also feeds
yes,
into the
yes.
narrative. So I'm wondering if when you started down the road of being an artist, did you kind of identify with a particular medium, but then as you find your voice and find your direction as a sculptor, is it like basically any medium is it's a tool in your box to try and implement into your story? Did you start as a ceramic artist or have you always come to it from a sculptural point of view?
Well, I mean, when I was little, I had, we called it the craft room, and I had a little craft table, and I would go through all my dad's miscellaneous stuff. He was the product of farming community, and you never throw anything away in a farming community. So I always
Oh,
had
right.
bits and
Yes.
bobs, and I would remake things. So that whole sort of like looking at objects and sort of thinking of them in a new way sort of was imprinted early. But then I had
Mm-hmm.
the theater background, and then I really don't have any formal training in visual art. I was working in
Oh,
something completely different, and when I decided to switch over, I just started taking, I was like, I'm just going to start taking community classes. So the
oh,
first
cool.
one was in ceramics. And, I think so much of our path is based on the kindness of people and the encouragement they give you. And she was just
Oh, sure.
really
Yeah.
lovely. And if she hadn't, if her name is Monica Litvini, and if she hadn't been, saying, come on, take another class, it's really good. You have a touch with this, even though you're looking at this blob and it's nothing where you want it to be. And so I
I
just kept
see.
taking classes, and I gravitated towards the figure the more I worked with clay, because that's a narrative tool that I just feel very comfortable with, especially with the theater background and
Yeah.
everything else.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that evolution started with kind of learning about the materials and satisfying a creative curiosity. And then things
Yes.
kind of
Yeah. Just kept,
honed
yeah,
in.
they kept snowballing. And so and it's through the course of being an artist how I've tried to incorporate more and more of the mixed media and different types of things. Again, I feel like I'm a little bit at a disadvantage because I don't have the formal training in visual arts in terms of just the exposure. Wherein, if you have a BFA in visual arts, you will have taken a whole bunch of things, mono printing and all these, just different courses, and I don't have that, so I have to seek it out. But I'm really hungry for it. So that's how all of this. It's sort of I look to incorporate new things, to learn about new things, and also to take my work into a different level. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I do feel like there is a benefit to what you're describing also because you're not burdened by the direction of, let's say, a BFA or something. You know what I mean? That it's like, well, you have to do it this way. Some people feel like that, or they feel about themselves as if that is something that is like a setback. I don't think it is. I actually don't think it is.
Yeah, I've felt that sort of behind the eight ball, sort of behind on everything a little bit. I think I've been able to work outside the normal path in a way that
Hmm.
I'm able to achieve and search out things that interest me and that I want to do in my work.
That's cool. That's awesome. So, one of the things I read about your approach towards your work from your artist statement is you like to delve into topics around the topic of the modern paradox. So, what
Mhm.
does that mean to you?
Oh, right. Okay. So basically, what's sort of driven my work, and again, I've said this before, is storytelling, because I feel like stories they're sort of the ground zero in terms of how we can learn and communicate with one another. They're so powerful. And right now, our ability to communicate, while there are so many ways, like having this wonderful discussion here, we're not in the same
Hmm.
place, and now it's going to be shared with other people, and that's like an amazing thing. Technology has also really heightened our impulse to just respond rather than to think or have a discussion about things, or to question and be curious about things. I think it's much more knee jerk in a way. I think a lot of the connection in that way is not helpful. It's not important. And
Hmm.
so here we are, connected in so many ways, yet we're all feeling a little bit disconnected. And I can just speak on sort of my journey is it seems like in the past 10 years, it feels like things have gotten sort of out of control in terms of how polarized we are and how little we just talk to one another and share things with one another. And so that's what I'm dealing with in my work is I want to create a dialogue with the viewer. I want the viewer to be able to come and see, to engage in a story. And a lot of times I'm happy if they go, "Oh my gosh, that's sort of scary." I'm like, "Okay, that's
Oh,
not how I
yeah.
meant it, but okay, let's talk about it."
Like no judgment on the reaction of what
Yeah.
you're getting, just to have that give and take. You know, something I've learned over the years is that forming a connection with somebody is really about sharing vulnerability,
Yeah.
sharing personal stories in
Yeah.
a safe space. And so that kind of comes up to me with what you're describing is you're making your art as a way to connect with people or the story to connect with people to say, it might land with someone and they say, I experienced this.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't land and they don't experience it,
Right.
but it's still that's the intent behind it.
It's definitely about connecting with other people. I feel like when I started as an artist, it was because of 9/11 sort of made me switch everything because I was in New York City working at that time. It was an overwhelming feeling of disconnection and that,
Oh,
what are we
wow.
doing? Why does everything seem like it's splitting apart? And so
Oh,
when I went back to work, they had right after 9/11 all of the flyers for the people that were missing, right? And describing who they
oh,
were.
right.
And a lot of them were, he's a father of three and he does this and he like, they were snapshots, they were stories of these human beings. And they were all over every kind of bus stop and every
Right.
kind of subway stop and everything. And I remember spending a lot of time reading them. At a certain point, the city decided, okay, we need to get rid of these. We need to move on. And so it was just
Oh,
they one
like we're
morning,
done with that.
we're done.
We're done with, yeah, okay.
So one morning they were just all gone.
Oh my
And
God.
I understand a reasoning of we need to move on as a society or as a community, but at the same time it just felt like those voices were gone and were just wiped out
Mm.
again.
So let me see if I understand you. So it wasn't just like these flyers weren't just saying this person is missing. This was a tribute to say this person has passed in this and wanting to have people notice or pay attention
Yeah,
that
remember when 9/11 first happened, a lot of people didn't know where everybody was. They didn't realize
right, like
that
they could be buried in the rubble or
they
something.
didn't know if they got out. So these were stories of these individuals saying, "Look, this is my husband. He is this, this, and this. He does this." It was like a little bit of a story to get you, oh, this is a real person. It wasn't just like a picture. All of them had a little bit of a description rather than just like height and weight and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
When they, I guess, decided that okay, most of these people that are missing have passed. They're not going to be
Oh,
found. That's when they decided to get rid of it all. And again, it was just sort of that, like, experiencing that loss and then experiencing it in sort of like a reverberation, like an earthquake after
yeah,
the big
circle
one.
around
Yeah,
again.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
that's when I quit my job and I thought I need to start like figuring out how I can express myself in a creative way. And so that's how it all began in terms of ceramics and my work now.
Okay, so before 9/11, you were doing the traditional job kind of thing is what
Yeah,
you're saying,
yeah,
and then you were like, I that was kind of the impetus to move into this new life.
right, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. That's impactful. I mean, and was it that you wanted to just like grab the meaning out of life? I mean, what did it kind of feel like? It's like we're here for such a short time and like the mortality of it all. It's like this is something I really want to do.
Yeah, and I had known I really wanted to be more creative. I was in a job that it was not creative at all, and it was an important job, but I was not satisfied, and it became more and more apparent that I was not going to find happiness in it. But it was
Yeah.
9/11 that sort of made me think I can't continue. This is yeah. And so and luckily, my husband was like, "Yeah, try it, do it." Yeah. He saw how
Mhm.
miserable I was and it it was one of those sort of things. Again, it's like all of a sudden you try to you listen to your inner voice or something, and sometimes things just click and work out, and it did at that time.
Did you start in with the whole focus of sculpture from the get-go, or kind of what was the start of what you were making?
The first class I ever took was a tile class.
Tile, okay.
Again, the teacher just was like, take another one. Come on, come on. But and then I started making pinch pot. I don't know if y'all are familiar with pinch pots, but you take like a ball of clay and then you stick your thumb in it and you just press around the
Okay.
sides. It's very meditative and you make the clay walls thinner and thinner and thinner. We had like, I don't know, 15 different types of clay in the studio. We were really lucky. So I just spent a long time, probably a year, just pinching different clays and getting to know their boundaries and how far I could push them. And I don't know, just having that quiet time. I can't say that, I went right into sculpting. It was more like, okay, let's just explore the material a little bit, which is, now looking back on it, I'm like thinking, God, that was actually a really lovely pause to be able to do that, because so often
Hmm.
now it's sort of there's that tension between exploring something and having to produce something, and at that point
Yeah.
there wasn't anything like that.
Yeah, we have that voice in our head saying, you have 2 days to work this out because you've
Right.
got a show in a month or whatever your
Yeah.
end is, right? But
Right.
back then, it was just like, I wonder what happens if I just spend the entire day pinching this material
Yeah.
and feeling good about it and seeing where it goes and
Right.
exploring it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those days do seem pretty far away, don't they?
They do. But it's sort of a nice reminder. I'm just thinking now, like maybe I need to start to reweave that back into my studio practice a little bit,
Hmm.
like allowing myself, you know, a few hours to just like play with the material and not really worry about the outcome. I'm so like sort of type A though, so that's really like a lifelong lesson journey for me. So
Okay, so you have to schedule in the playtime.
yes, exactly, exactly.
That's how type A's can do that and be creative.
Exactly.
I have known a glass blower before who said that there's a certain month, I can't remember the details, but let's say he picked the month of March or whatever every single year as his innovation time, where I'm not
Oh,
making work to sell, I'm not making work for a show. I'm just innovating and playing. And who does that anymore? I think that
right.
was a brilliant thing. I
Really
mean, I thought
lovely.
I should do that. And
Yeah.
now it's gone 5 years and I haven't done
Yeah.
that. So I'm going to have to take that advice.
I think that's lovely. Yeah, and especially something like that, because that's a whole month of you to just breathe. And
Uh-huh.
where if it's something shorter, there is still that time component to it, that okay, I only have a couple more hours to play with this, but a month you just can, you give yourself that permission. It's lovely.
And to not say when I get done with that month, I'm going to have a series realized.
Right.
It really is just going into it with to
Yeah.
see what comes up.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a medium like, I think, with sculpting clay or manipulating glass, it is like, I think that there needs to be that period. I guess now that I say that, I'm sure there's all these other mediums who are like, well, that fits for me too.
Right.
But yeah, all of us, it really just to, without any preconceived outcomes, just to see what happens, just
Yeah.
to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I think that's something almost like a human level people need to. We don't allow ourselves to do that
Yeah.
in society. I think it's like, that whole capitalist structure of like go, 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 and
Oh,
always have to be, achieving and stuff. It's not really ingrained in us to allow ourselves to just breathe and play.
yeah. I mean, how many of us have parents? And I'm not saying your parents are like this and my parents weren't like this, but there are a lot of us as we're growing up, be like, well, what are you going to do with that field?
Yeah.
Are you going to be an artist? How are you going to make a living out of that? There has to be like this productive end
Yeah,
game. And as kids, we are just so open ended about, I'm doing it because I like it. It's
right.
that simple,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Exactly.
And I've actually noticed in my young adult children, I have a daughter and a son who are in their young 20s, that as they were getting towards middle school, and the guidance counselors and the teachers, they were really pushing them towards careers pretty early. And I
Yes.
saw the pressure in them. Like, I have to know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life at 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot. I'm even
I saw
telling
the
them
same thing
now.
with my kids.
Yeah, I'm telling them now, it's like, you won't know that something brings you, like, it's like this new aha until you've experienced it and you're like, I want to chase that. You
Yeah.
can't anticipate it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. I was just talking to my youngest son is 19, and he's going into international politics, and he has a minor
Oh,
in
wow.
music. He's like, I always thought I would be interested in doing forestry. I'm like, take a class. Take a class or two in forestry, see where it goes. This is the time to do it, man. This is the time to
Yeah.
it gets harder and harder to switch modes. I
Mm.
mean, look at me. I didn't have this background, and here I am as an artist, but like, if you shouldn't feel pinned in by it, by anything, and they do that really young.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
So once you kind of got going with it and started to find your voice, what kind of a marketplace or venues did you start to sell your work?
I started in the community classes. They'd have the sales, the like
Mm-hmm.
holiday sales and stuff like that. And then I started doing art shows at the Four Bridges art show in Chattanooga. I don't know if you are familiar with that. I think they still have it. I don't know.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
They had a wonderful program for emerging artists. So they would
Okay.
provide you with a booth. They would bring other longtime show artists in, and you could have like a one, it was sort of like a powwow session. And so you could ask questions
Mm-hmm.
and get feedback from them on your work, or like your sales, or something like that. And they gave you business cards. I mean, it was just really
Oh,
nice. So that
nice.
sort of just that being in that program for that one year, that show just really sort of allowed me to lift off a little bit into art shows.
Well, to all the art shows out there who listen to this, if they wonder if that is a good program to do or if it's worthwhile, I mean, you're living proof right there that,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You got the benefit from that. And that was the launching pad for then you turning the work that you're learning about and that you're developing your voice for, then also then translating that into, how do I get this in collectors' hands? How do I
right.
sell this
Yeah,
work and all
yeah,
this stuff? So that was a kind of the next step for you.
yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really great, and especially because they connected you with so many, people that are professionals in the art shows, and so you really felt like you were starting out with a community, and you weren't
Mm.
like just
The
flying
resources,
solo.
it's
Yeah, the resources were
yeah,
amazing.
like the
Yeah,
that it's more than just saying, okay, well, you've juried into the emerging section and here's your spot and
right.
figure it out.
Yeah,
That next step of kind of like hand holding to, having a successful return. Because honestly, a lot of people, their first time at an event will go and they will maybe feel a little defeated
hmm,
because they maybe didn't sell what they wanted to
right,
sell.
right.
But those building blocks are so needed.
They are, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the people that I met. John Petrie he's a metal sculptor, and he was one of the people
Mm.
that was like one of the mentors, and yeah, it was just great. He was
That's
really
cool.
helpful.
So then you're not doing outdoor festivals now, but that was kind of what was the marketplace for you for a while anyway. Is that
Yeah,
true?
that's where I felt I guess it was easier for me to approach. Like galleries, that's a whole nother learning curve. You got to get, and
Yeah.
so but art shows allowed me to present my work to an audience and get feedback and hopefully make sales, and like
Have that access.
yeah, and like, there is that sense of community and family in those shows, which is so lovely too.
The community of other artists or
Yeah,
I
yes.
guess communities of collectors,
Yeah.
but yeah, the community of artists. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, there's a learning and a support system that
Hmm.
comes out of that community as well. and you were hungry for that.
Yes.
And then,
Yes,
so I know, like I just
absolutely.
mentioned, you're not doing those types of shows anymore. Were there struggles? Were you kind of butting up against things that didn't really fit for you?
I think that's a great way to put it. I think we're all trying to figure out how we can do what we want to do in a way that makes in ways that allow us to continue.
Yeah.
And for the outdoor show market for me, because I'm dealing with porcelain and little tiny fingers,
Mm.
it was super, super stressful because anytime there was a
Mm.
rainstorm or a windstorm, and of course, I probably have to apologize to everybody in the art show. It's like, oh, Kirsten's coming. There's going to be a huge hurricane. Okay. So,
Oh, so you were cursed? You brought the weather?
so after a while, just I felt like it. Just that kind of thing. It was really hard, and at the same time, I had two small kids, and so going
Mm.
away for a week or so all the time was it just got really hard. And there was one other element of it. I felt like it might my work might not always be a great fit with some of the audience at
Mhm.
those shows. I think that there's a lot of people that are afraid of figurative work just because it's
Yeah.
like a phobia
Hmm.
or something. They don't like figures, and so there was a lot of sort of not understanding or not wanting to engage. It, like I said, if somebody thinks something's scary, I'm just like, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about it. But
Uh-huh.
not wanting to engage, you can't even engage with them. I thought it just didn't feel right. And I remember I was at a show, the Milwaukee Museum show. I forget what
The
Lakefront.
Lakefront
Is it
Festival?
Lakefront? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful, beautiful there. But I had broken a few pieces, and I was just like, you hit those points where you're like, this is just ridiculous. And I was across from Robert and Leslie, and they were so lovely. And all the pieces that it felt like to me at that point, all the pieces that people were like, "Ew, what is that?" They were like, "Oh my God, that's really great. You should do more of that. You should do more of that." And so it was really like one
Mm.
of those things where I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. So if I want to move my work and maybe this isn't the right fit for it, at least right now, how can I pivot to allow me to continue to do the work I want to do? So and again,
Hmm.
it's one of those things where never say like, oh, it'll never be a good fit. But at that point, it just, whatever reason, just was not clicking the way I wanted it to.
It's really hard to be feeling that you're like a square peg in a round hole and not taking that on as like, well, what's wrong with me?
Yes,
Like I see exhibitor X over here, and they're like selling hand over fist. And
yes.
so what do I do? Do I change what I make? Do I change where I go? And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are struggling with that right now.
Yeah, we're all sort of on this journey to find exactly what works for the work that we want to do, right? And some people have
Yeah.
find it, and that's great. And other, I feel like I'm always like, okay, well, these are the established paths. What if I take this little deer path over here that leads to another one? Will that allow me to get where I want to go? So,
And
yeah,
you know what? The only way to know is to actually go down that path and find out
right.
how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true.
And so what were some of the things that you tried out? What was that little deer path that you took initially to kind of like find a different way for yourself?
Well, I started doing indoor fine craft shows.
Oh,
So, and they seem to be decreasing. I don't know since
yeah,
COVID
kind of
if
like the
it's
same model. Is it like the same model as the outdoor shows, but say like the Betsy Cubie shows that used to be
exactly,
around?
exactly,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. And so I started doing
Or
those. Yeah, the
ACCs or those kinds
ACC.
of things.
And that
Okay.
that seemed like a little better fit for me
You're like
to.
getting closer,
Yeah,
getting warmer.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah.
My feeling with some of those shows were just the energy, the enthusiasm levels. It was hard to feel that buzz that you sometimes feel out on the road. You know what I mean? Out on the outdoor shows. the indoor craft market, which I've did the Washington craft and Palm
Uh-huh.
Beach craft and all of those too. It just felt a little stuffy and a
Yeah,
little
it is a
whatever.
different environment, right? It is a little
It is.
sedate. Yeah. And they're playing
Yeah.
like really weird jazzy, guitar music over the speakers. And yeah, it felt a little bit more sterile than the outdoor. There is something lovely about outdoor shows that have a little bit, it's a little grittier and it's a little more real. And that is,
Approachable, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like you were saying, and I'm noticing too, some of those venues, the indoor shows from the retail aspect seem to have kind of lost their footing, right? I mean,
Yeah, right. So a lot of those fell off, and I started with OK Spark,
mm.
I guess in
And they're a
2014,
gallery.
and
Okay,
they're a
Spark is a
gallery.
gallery.
OK Spark is a gallery. Yes, it's owned by Matthew Fine, who is a cast glass artist, and
Hmm.
so he
And he
he
was one of us out here on the street too. He
yeah,
was one of the
yes,
one out there
yeah.
years ago.
Absolutely. And he has such a sort of entrepreneurial spirit and
Mm.
we had all been friends. So he just started looking at again like the deer path, looking at where we want to go or what we might want to try and then figuring out a way we could all do that together. So he had a brick and mortar building, so he started to apply as OK Spark, his gallery, to these bigger shows like Sofa, and
Mm.
I call them gallery shows because they're
Hmm.
just you don't have individual artist booths there. But the interesting
Sure.
thing about his model was not only that all the artists were sort of it was sort of like a family. We were all like
Hmm.
equally responsible for aspects of it and were really close knit. We were really intertwined together. And so it was less like somebody just saying, okay, well, you get this wall and there you are. It was
Okay. So
more,
it's his gallery, but
mhm,
yet there is collaboration that works between all of the participants, true?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Mm.
so, and one thing that he felt, and we all feel, especially coming from, the outdoor show environment, it's critical for artists to be there to discuss their work and to share what their vision
Mm.
is. I mean, it's once you talk to a person and they get to know you, that they're like, oh, I want to invite this piece of work into my home. I liked it first, and now I
Oh.
really want.
Yeah, there's
And
definitely that becomes more attractive
mhm,
than speaking to a gallery owner or a gallery employee representing a handful of the works that they're bringing to this event.
exactly, exactly. It was a little bit of a different approach and one that we felt more comfortable with working with the clients that came in. Sometimes those gallery booths can be a little, like we were talking about before, can be very sort of sterile and they don't have like they don't know all the processes as an artist would about their work
Mm.
and the work that they
Hmm.
represent. And so it was a nice opportunity to be able to, it was sort of a breath of fresh air from the typical model to then have artists there and we all equally talk about each other's work and we're all there as
Okay.
a family. Yeah.
I love that aspect because I've always felt like my artist friends can talk about it better. Like you can't
Oh
say,
yeah.
"Isn't this a beautiful piece I made?" It just sounds it's so off-putting.
It's not true. This one rocks, doesn't it? But I can say that about Matt. This piece,
Yeah.
it's stunning. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah,
That's totally cool. I love that. It sounds like Matt is comfortable giving everybody a voice and giving
absolutely.
everybody a say
Yeah,
in how you guys do it.
yes, it's definitely very team oriented, and in that way, again, it goes back to that. What's so nice about like art show is there that sense of community with each other, and here it's just on a smaller level, but it still has that same sense of community. And if I'm going to be out
Mhm.
selling my work, and to be quite honest, I sort of sometimes hate it. I hate the commodification of my artwork because I can
Yeah.
feel so great about it, and then you go to a show and it's not selling, and then you have those things playing in your head that like, oh, it's not as good, or blah 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 blah, and trying to like
Yeah.
separate all of that out and to just focus on the fact that I'm telling stories and then engaging in that way. That family group really is a soft place to land.
Yeah, you're not out there all on your own. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got a buddy, you've got a network.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys maybe give the real. I mean, it might not be as a criticism, but maybe as a, have you thought about this, or
Oh,
have you thought
sure.
about that? And that helps
Absolutely.
push it in a good
Absolutely.
way or
Yeah.
whatever. So it sounds like a really wonderful, nurturing kind of environment.
It is. I'm really so blessed to be a part of it. It's a great group. Really is. Yeah.
That format isn't probably right for everyone. I mean, I know a lot of people who are like, well, that's why I don't want to work in a job, because I don't want I just want to do what I want to do, and I don't
Yeah.
want to have to be told, or interact with other people's impressing upon me or my outcome
Right.
or whatever. I hear a
Right.
lot of artists who say that them alone in their studio is the perfect fit for them.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think another thing that's interesting about what you guys are doing is it kind of redefines like who gets to have access to the art buyer. These gallery owners, they take on the risk of, the high expense of producing or being involved in a show like that. And if an artist is able to step up and say, hey, we'll take the risk for this because there's going to be, something at the other side of it that gets you that connection.
Yeah. I mean, Matt started out. He had a brick and mortar, and it over COVID it closed, and he's working on getting
Oh,
another one. So, there it's atypical of the, it's like a pseudo formal of the gallery model.
sure. The
So
hybrid or
and
whatever.
yeah, yeah, and again, I keep saying family, but we all knew each other when we were doing the show circuit and everything, and so he just sort of picked people he wanted to work with and thought that would make a great blend, and it really has. Yeah.
So how long have you guys been together working this way and
So,
showing your work this way?
So I think I was looking at my CV, and it's since 2014. So we have like a
Mm.
10-year anniversary coming up. Woohoo for us. Yeah.
Woohoo, you got to plan something, right?
I know.
Well, would you say that at these shows that you do, the gallery model shows, that the collector is different than what we experience in other venues? Like
Mm,
who comes to the show like that to see, they seem to have more of an international draw to them. Like these are the best galleries from around the country all coalescing in one, venue, so to speak.
yeah, yeah. I think that the collector base, or the people that come to the gallery shows, are, because I think that in a lot of ways you get the same amount people that just are there as a pastime as you would in a show, in a
Mhm.
show circuit, in an outdoor show. And then you get those people that have come to buy. The gallery shows are less accessible to, hey, it's a really beautiful day, let's take the kids out type of
Yeah,
thing. Not, and
yeah,
not to say that those people aren't collectors. You can never
yeah,
judge who's a collector and who's not. But
right.
so I think in that way, it's a little different. I think what's ultimately different is the price point in those shows, because you're
Hmm.
dealing with things that are $50,000 to $100,000, a lot of them, and so
Hmm.
you're getting people that are used. It's hard to even imagine paying that for something, but that are used to sort of doing that, and
Right.
I think it's
That's the place to go to find that kind of work where they might
mhm,
not, like for
right.
example, sofa.
Yeah.
Some galleries would have Chihuly glass, so it is a whole other
and
echelon.
and also at these gallery shows, there's also, I think, a lot of I don't want to use the word that I use. So, a lot of like shiny object, look at me. It's
Mm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
resin, and it's really, not to say that it's meaningless, but it's
Yes.
a lot of sort of flash and not a lot of substance because it's gallery driven. There's a lot more of that stuff rather than in like the indoor craft shows or in on the art show circuit. There is a little bit more of a focus on making sure that this is you're
Yeah.
curating the show to make sure that the artist's work is not something that has come from overseas or is not something that is mass produced, and I think
Sure. Yeah.
not only the show curators but also fellow artists all sort of curate that and make sure that the work is sort of real. It has this feeling of realness to it.
Hmm.
Of course, we're talking in generalizations here, but I think that there's a lot of really lovely intimate work at gallery shows, but then there's also a lot of big statement work that
Sure.
is sometimes it's very commercial, and there's a place for that, and
Uh-huh.
those gallery shows are a place for that kind of work.
For the big commercial work, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
sometimes that
Hmm.
that can be a place, like somebody that wants to do something for their office building, or this big huge weird hexagon shaped thing, of resin or whatever, and that works really well in their lobby, and so there is a place for that, and I'm not diminishing its value so much as just to say that then in comparison it's sort of harder to have quieter work that's more intimate and doesn't have that's like the big sort of, I don't know if tension's the right word, but it's you have two different worlds sort of colliding in that gallery setting.
Hmm.
And you could have the big like there's a lot of the Marilyn Monroe and the Audrey Hepburn stuff with photographs, and then it's
Sure.
taken and manipulated and things like that. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but then it's very different from something that's a little bit more personal. Like that flashy thing can be right beside
Hmm.
you. And so then the quiet things are really really go off the radar. So that would be, I think, a difference. And I think in a lot of the outdoor shows and the curated craft shows, seems to me that they tend to be a little bit more geared towards highlighting artists made, handmade
Mm.
things, and whether there's a one person or they might have some employees with them, but it's a little bit more
The authenticity of the
authentic. I
artist.
was going to say authentic. Yes.
Right. That this came from the human that's standing in that booth.
Yes.
And for the most part at the outdoor shows, it's one artist, one body of work per booth.
Yes.
And the thing that's different when it's more of a gallery setting is there can be, let's say, five, let's just pick a number, five artists that are represented in this gallery space. And so that person who is in charge of that space, the gallery owner, is going to highlight their work as if they would in their gallery. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
like the work that needs more quiet attention, like theater aesthetics, you know how to direct the eye so that this piece, which might be small and expressive, gets the equal kind of focal point as the big shiny thing that is, 2 feet away from it, because it's all being designed to move
Yes.
through space.
And if it happens within a gallery, then then there is that balance. But when you're talking about a whole show, sometimes that balance gets thrown off a bit. I feel like it seems to me.
Hmm.
I don't know.
It is good to talk about the differences because when we're out on the street doing the art fair, art festivals, as much as we want our booth to look like a gallery setting, it does feel like a bunch of different stores, under a tent. And it is a whole different look and feel when it's an indoor gallery setting.
Yeah, and I think there's something that's wonderfully authentic about that in terms of the outdoor shows.
So you mentioned you are a wife and mother. How do you juggle? And you said the outdoor shows kind of were a challenge to do that.
Yeah.
How do you feel like, how do you find that balance to be an artist who wants to share your voice, but then also having these other responsibilities too?
Yeah, I think it was really hard because I got pregnant when I quit my job that same month. I
Okay.
got pregnant. So it was sort of like, oh, great, I'm starting on this new path and I'm going to be a mom all at the same time. So, all the
All sorts of
tensions,
newness.
yes, all the tensions but I have an amazing partner, Richard Cosby, who he's always gave me the space to try to
Mm,
go after what I was trying to learn. So that was amazing. I couldn't have done it if I didn't have somebody that would support what I was trying to do. And then when we ended up moving from New Jersey for his job to Atlanta area. And all the houses we looked at, the first thing was, okay, it needs to have an unfinished basement because I'm taking that over. And that was like,
that's right.
that was the best thing because then kids are
Oh,
taking a nap. I've got 30 minutes before something's due. I can weave.
you can integrate it
It's all about
all.
yes. It was so great. It
Mm,
really worked out well. And I think at the same time, like when I was sort of, I'd come back from a show dejected or whatever and feeling like,
yeah.
oh, that didn't work out, or what should I do? And then the kids would come and hug me and give me pictures. I'm like, oh yeah, it doesn't really matter. Oh yeah, okay.
Well, this audience here missed me, right? The audience at home missed me, and they think the world of me.
Exactly. It's perspective, right? So, I mean, for a
Hmm.
while though, when I was doing outdoor shows, I would have, you have that little, like, I always call it like the weeping corner, the corner you can go around and just like eat your sandwich or something like that. And, and I would have just their pictures all over the back, and so,
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
So it was nice
that's
to
like,
sort of
okay.
balance. Yeah.
Oh, so I think about, like, for us being parents and being two artists raising kids in this hustle has been a very unique challenge. Not unique to other artist parents out there, but it's
Right.
it's a unique
Yeah.
challenge to most people out there, and it's just coming to me now. It's just dawning on me now that I'm an empty nester and the kids are all right. They're in their
Yeah.
own places and they're supporting themselves. And I didn't realize how much they occupied my daily headspace. Even if I'm working in the glass studio,
Oh my
where
gosh, you are so right.
it's like, so you think about the struggles they're having at school. You're thinking
Yes.
about the event they've got to do that night. You're thinking all this other stuff. And now that I don't have to think about every little nuance that's going on in their lives, we can really just, as artists, kind of live in our world, live in the
Yes.
world that we want up in here,
Yes.
that tells the story or fleshes out that story, instead of like, okay, I've got a half an hour in the studio and I got to go crank this
Yeah.
out real quick
Yeah.
before I throw in their supper.
Right. Exactly. And go to listen to like the principal lecture about whatever. Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
yeah, I'm just realizing that now because Dylan this is his first, he's a freshman and my other son, Caden, is a junior. And so all of a sudden
okay.
this year, I was like, whoa, there's a lot more space. I mean, time still like
Yeah.
flies by in some ways, but there's space to like figure out other things than just sort of
Yeah.
reacting to what's going on because the kids are, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, it's lovely. And I think that's why, like we were talking before about the people at my workshops, like a lot of them are women who are, their kids have grown up, and so all of a sudden they have this sort of creative outpouring and this sense of wanting to remake themselves and to
Hmm.
pursue things that they haven't had a chance to pursue. And that's exciting because they're so excited about it as well.
So tell me about that. You offer workshops. You teach, right? You
Yes,
teach
yes.
workshops.
Hmm.
So talk about that.
So I teach workshops. It's usually, well, it's 3 to 5 a year probably, and they
Okay.
either weekend or They could be longer. The ones that I do overseas are usually about 10 days because, I mean, you're overseas. So why would you only spend 3 days overseas?
And where is your next one going to be overseas?
So my next one overseas is going to be in San Rafael, France. And it's a lovely place because it's right on the Mediterranean, but it backs up
Okay.
against the mountains. And so there's a sort of rocky, rugged aspect to it, and then this wonderful beachside aspect to it. But that area is so rich with storytelling and myth from, that come from Turkey and all
Mm,
over from the Mediterranean in that area. And so it's lovely to sort of tap into all of that storytelling and use it in the studio.
cool. I mean, it sounds like you're facilitating that nurturing environment that you got when you made your shift. And to create that safe space to have not just make art. I mean, obviously, it sounds like the art is the main component, but there's also like a sense of connection and bonding and should I say therapy? I know it's all a sense of like expressing something that's inside and saying it's okay. Tell me what you're feeling or tell me what you get
Absolutely.
from that.
Yeah, and the great
Yeah.
thing about the overseas workshops is that you're going out and exploring, and you don't speak the language most of the time. You don't,
Okay.
you're driving down the wrong way on the one way, and you get back into the studio, and so all of this like usual stuff in your head of like, oh, I don't know, I can't do it. You're exhausted by the fact that you didn't know what you were doing for the whole day. So just getting into the studio and working, there's like a freedom there. You sort of
Mm.
there's things that can sort of stifle and limit us. I think when you're put into a setting that you're unfamiliar with, some of that starts to melt away. It can be
Mm.
much freer with how you want to express yourself.
As you are discovering things, like you're in an environment that's so different from what all of the participants have on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so many times we all are so embarrassed or so like we feel bad that maybe we don't know something, and it's
Yeah.
hard to be vulnerable and say, I don't really know what I'm doing here. But this is a place where you're all learning together and
Yes.
and you're all making discoveries together and it's like it's all okay. It's like it's kind
Right.
of part of the whole thing.
It's a whole kind of bonding thing. Yeah. And you can laugh at each other, and we're meeting at a winery, and one participant, they ended up going down a road, and it ended up being they were driving through the golf course of like
Okay.
finally got to the where you're like, well, we went via golf course. I don't know what happened. And you're like, okay. All the overseas workshops have been especially tight, and I think it's because of that there's an extra level of bonding there,
Yeah.
and there's so much to learn.
And I think it also appeals to the person like you're talking about that has always put their family first, maybe. And that's like now they get to think about the things that
Yes.
give them inspiration. I think that's
Right.
really exciting.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'll let now that I'm sort of at the same point, I can completely understand that the world sort of opens up again to you, and you're like, okay, I'm
Sure.
going for it. You
Yeah.
spend this much of time, like sort of in a way, even if you're pursuing your dreams, you're sort of a little bit stifled a little bit. You're having to
Hmm.
balance other things. You're having to everything's a negotiation, and then at a certain point
Hmm.
it's like, oh well, hell, the chains are off now, I'm going.
How many of these overseas workshops have you done?
Well, I started right before COVID, and then COVID hit, so we
Mm.
tried to manifest one for like 3 years in a row every time we thought COVID was like
That's
over,
right. It's over now.
remember? Yeah, yeah. Over, yeah. So so this will be my fourth one, and then I'm
Wow.
planning to
Oh, that's
do a couple more next year in different areas. Yeah, it's really nice to work in an area where you're learning, that somebody has a facility there, so there's that
mm,
extra level of support. So if you need something or have to work something out, that it's that structure's already there for you. So that's
mm,
great.
hmm. And then do you feel like, I mean, you're facilitating this workshop, but then do you feel like on a creativity level that your soul is getting fed by the experience as well, and it kind of
Oh,
it feeds back into your
absolutely.
own artwork?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to say that when I'm teaching, I'm usually not thinking like I'm always talking to everyone in the class about, okay, what's the story and what do you want to express? And then they turn to me and go, well, what's your story? And I'm like, well, I can't think that way when I'm teaching. I have no story. I'm out of stories. But it certainly comes back around not only in like how much inspiration I'm just getting, in just feeling, but also like when I get back into the studio and how it weaves itself through the other aspects of my work. Absolutely. And just being around a
Cool.
lot of creative people, you're always learning new ways of thinking
Yeah.
and new ways of expressing things, and that's really fascinating. It's a special time. Yeah.
Wow. That sounds really great. I just love that you've, taken experiences over your career, and you're creating these situations with people that form connection and form inspiration. I think too often we kind of sit in isolation as artists, and we look outside of ourselves, and we feel like, well, what's wrong? Why aren't we selling the way we want to sell? Or it looks like things are going better for that one over there, and that's really being outside of our own power.
Right.
And I love
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
follow your voice, you encourage others to find their voice and follow their voice as well. And I just find a lot of inspiration in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this whole journey to to strengthen my voice, find it and strengthen it is my artistic journey. And I mean, I put a little dot on the lower lip of each of my figures, and it's a symbol to remind me to be true to my voice. Because
Oh,
the bottom line is whether it sells or not, and whatever happens and it breaks or whatever, but is the story good? Is the story true? Is the story authentic? You know, that voice is the voice I keep trying to strengthen in my head.
right. That the value isn't given its weight from an
Right.
external source.
And especially when it comes to storytelling and the need to focus on listen to each other's stories, the fact that I'm able to create these stories and then talk to people about them, and they can be moved or not moved by them, but that's an incredible blessing. And so that's the work I want to do.
And that's the kind of connections you want to build.
Yeah.
Because when you tell something from a very sacred place, somebody else can say that, well, I feel safe telling you something that's really important and sacred to me. And that's how true connections build and grow, as opposed to the bragging kind of energy of saying my world is great and everything is great. Well, then I don't want to share with anybody that things aren't great with me. So,
Right.
you know what I mean? Keep that at a
Right.
distance.
It's so true. So true.
Believe it or not, this has been an hour, so we've had a really good
Oh,
talk.
really? Okay. Awesome.
And so one of the things I wanted to say as we lead out here is Will and I, when we would decide, when we come across people we're interested in talking to, we kind of banter back and forth with each other about it, and say, what would you ask? What would you ask? Whatever. I brought up your name. I said, hey, Will, have you ever heard of Kirsten Stingle? And he said, oh, yeah, she's badass. Totally talk to her. She's totally cool. So
Oh, oh
I'm
my
so
God.
glad this happened.
I'm gonna get that tattooed on me.
So anyway, well, this has been so much fun. Thanks for taking the
Have
time and
been.
sharing about yourself, and looking forward
Thank
to
you
everyone
so
hearing your
much. Thank
story.
you for thank you for allowing me this opportunity. It's been really great. And it's so nice talking to you. Now I don't want to end. Let's just go to round two.
We'll just keep on going. Well, okay. So now we know each other, so we we don't have to record all of our conversations, but
Exactly.
Kirsten, this has been fun. Thanks so much. Okay,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Tell Will I said hi.
I will.
He's a
Okay.
badass too.
Great talk with Kirsten. That was another killer interview. Douglas, nice job with that. And thank you, Kirsten, for giving us your time and your insight and sharing your vision. So just a good talk right there.
It's interesting to know kind of different mindset, different world between these gallery shows versus the road shows that we are typically used to. She's, been in both, and she has a different take on them. So I really was interested in hearing what she had to say about that and about being willing to pivot when things aren't going right. So
yeah, it's tough to sell a certain kind of work at an art show.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them only, like some of these best shows,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote best shows don't
Yep.
work for some people. There are plenty of people that I know that don't go to some of the quote unquote top shows or super shows or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or even apply because they're like, you know what? I can do just as well at this show in my backyard here and sleep in my own bed on Sunday night. So it's interesting to see what works for her and how she's taking her career.
And to make those changes when you kind of feel like something's not working for you, or a round peg in a square hole, and you're like, why does it work for other people? It's not working for me. And
Right.
something that happens nowadays with being able to look over our shoulder and look online and look on social media, that can really knock us off of our vision, knock us off of feeling good about what we want to make and put out there in the world. So
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Social media is a time suck and it makes me feel bad.
mm-hmm.
For example, I hate, I'm not that far away from Texas here in
Yeah.
New Mexico. So
Mhm.
I don't have to leave 2 days in advance. But going online and looking and seeing everybody saying leaving for Bayou on Monday, it gives me a freaking panic attack. I texted you
Yeah.
and I was like, when are you guys leaving? I know better than to ask that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, we're going to leave on Monday. I'm like, I'm going to be painting on Monday
Yeah.
and Tuesday. I'm going to throw something that's dry on Wednesday morning into the truck before I hit the road.
Yeah, and we talked about those panic dreams where we're showing up late to the party or showing up late to late for school kind of thing, and
Right.
that it's true. It creates undue anxiety, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It doesn't help me at all. And also, you haven't seen me on there much. I'll
Me either,
I'll duck
by the
into
way.
Facebook and take a dump on Tom Hanks' performance and Elvis, and then jump back out and be like,
Okay.
I just need everybody to know that I think he sucked. And then I'm out.
I'm out. You guys do with that what you will.
Yeah.
I needed to get my opinion out there in the ether.
Yeah. Thought grenade. Here you go. And I'm done.
Well, thanks for making time to hammer out this talk, and I'm looking forward to seeing you face to face.
Yeah, I think we're neighbors at Bayou, so I'll see you
darn
soon,
close.
sir. Thank you to the Bayou folks for giving me a good neighbor there, and we'll see you soon. They basically just did that so they knew that you'd have some kind of help, right?
Maybe.
Help me.
Oh, man. It's not been easy. I don't mean to complain, but it's not been easy. But I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there.
Yeah, well, I'll bring a rusty saw in case we need to saw that foot off.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
All right.
Let me
Sounds
just do
good.
it.
All right, buddy. Travel safe. Hey to Renee.
All right. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.